favorite Disney movie is The Hunchback of Notre Dame. Maybe then you thought, I wonder what the book's like. Then maybe you bought it or downloaded it since it's public domain and you're less stupid than me. And then perhaps you read it. And if it got to that point, I am so sorry. Hi, hello, I'm Liv, and this is I've read The Hunchback of Notre Dame, so you don't have to. Kinda obvious, but spoilers for the whole thing, and a few spoilers for the animation, since I'm gonna compare them every once in a while. Yeah, I have nothing else to say. This book is just, it speaks for itself, so let's start. The book is set in 1482, and it starts on the 6th of January, birthday of these fine folks here, which is both the day of Epiphany, a Catholic holiday that I forgot what it is. I think it's when you have to take down the Christmas ornaments. I don't remember. And the Festival of Fools. Almost everyone on this fine and chilly day is headed to the Palace of Justice to watch a play and also see the Pope of Fools be crowned, which is an ugliness contest. It's kind of funny that in the middle of the Palace of Justice description, the author says that if a certain someone hadn't set the place on fire, he could simply say, "Go visit it," and then he would be exempt from describing it. Yeah, I bet he totally doesn't describe to exhaustion the places that still exist. Anyways, the place is packed, there are people hanging from the ceiling, and that's when we hear... "Why, upon my soul, 'tis you, Johannes Frollo de Moledino." No, it's not that Frollo. If you know the musical, it's not that Frollo either. I mean, it is Claude Frollo's younger brother, but he's not in the church. He's a student. And a rascal, as we can clearly see depicted here, since he is hanging from the ceiling. After a while, my copy of the book switches over to the name Jean, so that's what I'm gonna call him because it's easier. Jean and his friends are teasing and shouting at the people below for lack of better to do while the play doesn't start, since the important people are late. Midday comes and they're still missing, and after 15 minutes people are starting to get angry, like screaming about hanging the guards angry. It's only a 15-minute delay, but you know what? Good for them. As things are dangerously close to getting out of hand, a mysterious figure appears from behind a pillar close to the stage and tells everyone to start before the important people arrive, and he'll calm them down. That was Pierre Gringoire, the author of the play. You like my French accent there? I'm gonna have to say that name a lot, so get used to it. Gringoire is overcome. Oh no! Gringoire is overcome with pride and joy because his play is finally being performed. There was a homeless guy perched on something, I don't know, but he was higher up than the audience, but other than that, everything was going swimmingly, until Jean notices the homeless man and starts screaming and laughing and pointing at him. Since, now everyone's already looking at him, the homeless man starts begging for money. Obviously, the author of the play is very unhappy with that and yells at the actors to keep going. A young woman gets his attention and asks him to explain what had been said in the play up until that point. And at that moment, the cardinal shows up and everyone is cheering and going insane because of him, and the play is even more forgotten than it already was. Then some Austrian representatives come in and everyone goes insane again. And then a sock manufacturer shows up. I honestly don't know what happened, but they let him sit with the other important people. And then, remember the homeless guy? Him and the sock guy start chatting. They're friends. After a while, Gringoire starts shouting for them to restart the play. And the students are like, no, the play is so boring. And they're stuck in that discussion for a while. But in the end, the play continues from where they had left off. And then, some other guy shows up. And then another. And then another. And then another. And the bailiff has to announce every single one of them. This sounds like one of those nightmares where you have to get something done, but there's always things showing up to get in your way. Yeah, but this is happening for real to Gringoire. Then the sock manufacturer shouts to everyone. This play is so boring. They just insult each other but never actually fight. Why don't we skip over to the ugliness competition? And everyone is ecstatic. Except, Gringoire. I feel bad for him, but also don't. Obviously, a lot of unfortunate things happened, but this play is supposed to go on for 4 hours. You have to know your audience, then tone it down even more, because after 4 hours of standing, their brains would be mush. What was he thinking with an overcomplicated story? Anyways, we reach chapter 5. Yup, 5. And I know some of you are skeptical about how much filler I'm sparing you of. Titled Quasimodo. The titular Hunchback finally appears after 4 entire chapters. Let's see. The competition is already going on, with the contestants shoving their heads through a window to be judged, but Gringoire, instead of admitting defeat, tells his actors to continue the play. He notices that there's only one guy who's still facing the stage, and Gringoire wakes him up from his nap to thank him for being so faithful. Then the crowd goes insane again, this time because of ugly candidate number 74 up there, Quasimodo. There's not much to say about Quasimodo's description. Disney was pretty faithful appearance-wise in the adaptation, surprisingly. I guess the only different thing is that this eye protuberance thingy makes Quasimodo not be able to see with this eye, and in the animation it's just... yeah. Anyways, the people crown him as their Pope of Fools, and they dress him up and go on a parade through the streets of Paris. Yay, none of that heartbreaking scene. Yeah, the play is still going. There are only a few people left, plus the students, but even the play's musicians are gone. Even when some of the remaining few start talking, Gringoire is still trying to be sort of optimistic. Wow. Then one of the students scream, Esmeralda! Esmeralda is at the square! So yeah, R.I.P. After that, our dejected author walks through the streets of Paris feeling down on his luck, and also he hasn't been paid for writing the play yet, so great. He also says that he would happily drown himself if only the water wasn't so cold. He's the most dramatic of them all, I swear to God. In his wanderings, he ends up finding himself face to face with Esmeralda, performing for some people. Whether this young female was a human being, or a fairy, or an angel, Gringoire, skeptical philosopher and satirical poet as he was, could not at the first moment decide, so completely was he fascinated by the dazzling vision. She was not tall, though she appeared to be so from the slenderness and elegance of her shape. Her complexion was dark, but it was easy to divine that by daylight her skin must have been the beautiful golden tint of the Roman and Andalusian women. Her small foot, too, was Andalusian. She danced, whirled, turned around on an old Persian carpet carelessly spread on the pavement. And every time her radiant face passed before you as she turned, her large black eyes flashed lightning. Every eye was fixed upon her, every mouth open. And in truth, while she was thus dancing, what with the sound of the tambourine, with her two plump, exquisitely shaped arms held above her head, her bodice of gold without folds, her spotted robe which swelled with the rapidity of her motions, her bare shoulders, her finely turned legs, which her petticoats now and then discovered, her black hair, her eyes of flame, she was a supernatural creature. Verily, thought Gringoire, it is a salamander, a nymph, a goddess, a bacchanal of Mount Him calling her salamander, like God-tier poet right here. Then he notices that she's Romani, and the illusion breaks, of course. She's doing tricks with her gold, and the weird guy who won't stop looking at her says that it's witchcraft and blah 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 blah. After a while, the Quasimodo procession appears, and the weird guy, who was obviously Archdeacon Claude Frollo, is angry at this tomfoolery, and Quasimodo is subservient to him, and the two walk away. And then, Gringoire, "'Tis wonderful, by my faith!" exclaimed Gringoire. "But where shall I find a supper?" Gringoire took it into his head to follow the Romani at all hazards. He saw her with her gold turned into the Rue de Cotillier, and to the same street he directed his course. "Why not?" said he to himself, by the way. Dude, what in tarnation? He doesn't see the issue here. He even asks himself why not. I can't believe it. The stupidity. But then again, I do remember reading a Sherlock Holmes story and Watson thinking that it was perfectly harmless to follow a young woman to and fro, so maybe it's just a 19th century thing. Then, when she turns a corner, she screams, and Gringoire can see her shadow and the shadows of two men holding her. "Watch! Watch!" shouted Gringoire, boldly advancing. One of the men is Quasimodo. Him and his friend, who is totally not Frollo, try to run away with Esmeralda, but some guards show up and save her. That's when she meets Captain Phoebus and runs away into the night. Then our valiant hero is laying there and he suddenly realizes that he's laying on the Paris mud? Yeah. And he's freezing because it's January. Then a bunch of kids show up and throw a mattress on top of him without seeing him, saying that they're gonna light a fire. He jolts up and the kids think it's the guy they stole the mattress from and run away. Please tell me, Is this book supposed to be comedic? The genres only list romanticism and gothic fiction, but like, are you listening to me right now? What is this? Anyways, like an idiot, Gringoire runs aimlessly through the streets of Paris and obviously he gets lost and ends up in an even sketchier part of town. He's in the place of miracles, where most of the Roma people live. They decide to take him to the king of the place to be judged, and he is none other than Clopin, the homeless man at the play earlier. As we've established, Gringoire is a bit of an idiot, so he doesn't manage to get 2 sentences out before the court decides to hang him. At the last possible second, Esmeralda comes to the rescue and marries him to save him from hanging, but the marriage is only valid for 4 years. Okay, I guess I just don't understand Roma laws. He obviously thinks that she's infatuated and makes advances towards her, only for her to pull a dagger on him and be like, I only married you to save you from hanging. Why else would I? Oof, but also well deserved. Gringoire insists for a while, and then the subject shifts to her almost abduction. This question made the Roma girl shudder. Oh, the horrid hunchback! She exclaimed, covering her face with her hands, and she shivered as from the effect of intense cold. Yeah, she's not that Esmeralda. This one is just a regular girl. He asks her why her name's Esmeralda, and she says maybe because of this, and shows him a little green pouch thing. She says it's an amulet and she's always had it, but she doesn't really remember her parents or where she's from or anything much, really. Book 2 ends with her going to bed and locking the door, and Gringoire being like, well, at least I wasn't hanged. Oh yeah, The Hunchback of Notre Dame is divided in books. I'm not sure why. And no, you're not crazy. We're like 1/6 into the book, and the titular hunchback has only made very brief appearances. Moving on. The next chapter is a description of Notre Dame, blah blah blah. Skip, you already know how it looks. Now, listen. A whole chapter describing Notre Dame, I can understand. It's in the title. What I can't understand is this next chapter. It describes Paris in general. What? I know that books back then were sort of like travel guides. You'd read a story set in a place and you'd want to know what it was like and maybe visit. And there are compelling ways to do that. But this Paris chapter is so boring, and when Victor Hugo started describing the godforsaken inclinations of the terrain, I skipped to the next chapter. And just like that, we've reached book 4. For real, if you know why this is divided in books, I'd really like to know, because I couldn't find any reasons in my brief research, and it seems so odd. Anyways, book 4. It starts out with Quasimodo's backstory. On Quasimodo Day, which is the first Sunday after Easter, baby Quasimodo was left in Notre Dame, and that's how he got his name. From what I read about the etymology of the word, Disney's
And Frollo gave the child a cruel name, a name that means half-formed, Quasimodo.
Is a huge stretch. Quasimodo comes from the first words of the Mass of the Sunday after Easter, Quasimodo geniti infantes, meaning as newborn babes. The word modo means manner or mode, and the word quasi means as or like. So if you really squint, you can kinda see where the whole half-formed bit comes from. Unless there's some wordplay here that only works in the original French. In which case, I'm sorry, but I don't know French, I don't know anyone who knows French. And if no one on the internet has brought up that this book is kinda funny, what hope do I have of finding anything on this one line? We're moving on. The people are gawking at the deformed baby and saying that he's a bad omen and planning on burning him, as you do. When Frollo comes to the rescue and says that he'll keep the baby, some women whisper about him being a wizard, and it's implied that there were already suspicions since he's kinda weird. And now we get to know a bit about Frollo. He's part of the gentry, which are nobles but like the small nobles. It's really weird that he went into the church when he was literally the first one on the inheritance line. But okay. Disease happens and his parents die. And suddenly, Frollo, who had always been a bookworm and there was literally nothing else to his personality, got attached to his younger brother, who was still a toddler. After that, he decided for sure to become a priest, splitting his time between his studies and visiting Jeanne. When Quasimodo was left in Notre Dame, Frollo was reminded of his own little brother and decided to adopt the abandoned child. So the years went by. To Quasimodo, Notre Dame was everything there was, everything that existed. Being an orphan, deformed, and having an intellectual disability made it impossible for there to be anything else. He became the bell ringer, and that made him go deaf on top of everything else. Victor Hugo also explicitly says that Quasimodo was evil. Evil because people rejected him since birth, but evil nonetheless. Keep that in mind. And, well, the only things he truly loved were the cathedral, its bells, and Claude Frollo. He had a dog-like devotion to his adoptive father, never extending to him the hatred he extended to everyone else. Frollo! Well, he takes care of Quasimodo, gives him a job, place to live. Honestly, he seems to feel mostly neutral towards him. Anyways, Frollo expected Jeanne to become a great student just like himself, but the little brother turned out to be a little devil, and all he did was laze about and waste his time and money. The Archdeacon launched himself even further into his studies in an effort to ignore the disappointment. He developed a passion for alchemy, scouring places associated with Nicolas Flamel and Notre Dame for alchemical clues. Lately, Frollo had been worrying about his purity. He had always hated women, but he seemed to be hating them even more as of late, Roma women especially. So here they are, a pair of outcasts. All they have to do to be shouted at and humiliated is walk around the block. This next chapter is kind of funny because the king's doctor goes to visit Frollo and Frollo is like, "Dude, are you for real? You believe in medicine and astrology?" And like 10 seconds later starts talking in alchemy riddles. Anyways, now Frollo has some influence over the king. Okay. So back to present day Quasimodo. He was arrested after trying to kidnap Esmeralda and is being judged. And I am once again asking myself, is this book supposed to be comedic? Because he's being judged and the judge is deaf. And Quasimodo is also deaf. So they're just kinda, not communicating. The judge ends up deciding that he's gonna be whipped as punishment. Yay, we didn't completely get rid of that terrible scene. By the way, we are almost halfway through. Yeah, how time flies. The point I want to bring up is, with everything we've talked about, would you say, with all your heart, that Quasimodo is the protagonist of this book? If you say yes, I'm throwing you in the wood chipper. He's literally the character that has featured the least in the book. And by the way, they could have used this judgment scene to kind of showcase how insane and unpredictable and evil he is. But he kind of just responds politely to what he thinks the judge is asking him. Like, the book has time for pages upon pages of "I believe in astrology." Well, I don't. Fights and completely irrelevant gossip. But developing one of the characters? Absolutely not. And hold your horses with your knowledge about the title change. I'm gonna go over that later. And I know what you're thinking. The irrelevant stuff probably isn't all that bad. Well, may I present you a random page I picked randomly while I was going through the script again. It is thus that the wonderful art of the Middle Ages has been treated in almost every country, especially in France. In its ruins, we may distinguish 3 kinds of injuries, which have affected it in different degrees. In the first place, time, which has here and there chapped and everywhere worn its surface. In the next, revolutions, political and religious, which, blind and furious by nature, have rushed tumultuously upon it, stripped it of its rich garb of sculptures and carvings, broken its open work and its chains of arabesques and fanciful figures, torn down its statues, sometimes on account of their mitres, at others on account of their crowns. Lastly, the fashions, more and more silly and grotesque, which since the splendid deviations of the regeneration have succeeded each other in the necessary decline of architecture. The fashions have in fact done more mischief than revolutions. They have cut into the quick. They have attacked the osseous systems of the art. They have hacked, hewn, mangled, murdered the building in the form as well as in the symbol, in its logic not less than in its beauty. And then they have renewed a presumption from which at least time and revolutions have been exempt. In the name of good taste, forsooth, they have impudently clapped upon the wounds of Gothic architecture their paltry gewgaws of a day, their ribbons of marble, their pompous of metal, a downright leprosy of eggs, volute, spirals, draperies, garlands, fringes, flames of stone, clouds of bronze, plethoric cupids, chubby cherubs, which begins to eat into the face of art in the oratory of Catherine of Medicis, and puts it to death 2 centuries later, writhing and grinning in the boudoir of the Dubarry. Okay, now that that's settled, let's go back to the square where Esmeralda was dancing the previous night. There was an old woman screaming at her from a cell then. I actually don't remember if I mentioned it. The cell doesn't have a door, they just built the wall with the woman inside. But there is a window so she can receive food and stuff like that. The book says that those types of cells weren't all that uncommon in the medieval ages. Just in the middle of a busy market, there was a cell holding someone who just prayed and lamented day in and day out. I obviously had to go on a Wikipedia deep dive because I had never heard of that. I couldn't find anything about just random cells in the middle of the street with regular people in them, but I read about anchorites. Anchorites or anchoresses would live in a cell attached to a church and would be considered dead to the world and a sort of living saint. They would give advice to people and sort of did their own thing, as much as their own thing you can do inside a cell, since the person of lower hierarchical position they responded to was the bishop himself. You didn't have to be a priest or a nun to become an anchorite, but it was more common. That's insane. Imagine you just show up to a church like, hey, I just converted to Catholicism and I want to live here and for you to provide for me. And also I'm gonna give any advice I want to people and you're gonna see me as a saint, by the way. But yeah, I don't think anyone is going to this crazy woman who hates the Romani for advice on anything. Her backstory goes something like this. 20 years are old age when it comes to love. Since she was too elderly for love, and she had already lost herself, and then her dear mom died, she prayed to have a child, and then she gave birth to a little girl, Agnes, some 16 years ago. Even though they were poor, the old hag, who wasn't old back then, spoiled her daughter. She just loved her so much. Amongst the daughter's possessions, there was a fabulous pair of shoes. The king himself had never had something like that. One day, a group of Roma people were camped close by, and the old hag fell victim to her curiosity, taking Agnes to them to learn about the little girl's fortune. They were mesmerized by Agnes, and told the would-be recluse that her daughter would be a queen and blah 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 blah. The following day, the mother just had to tell her neighbor about the news, leaving the baby alone in the house for a few minutes. But when she came back, the baby wasn't there anymore. In her place was Quasimodo. A few days later, they found a few of the girls' clothes around the Romani campfire, but they themselves were long gone. Shortly after, the mother disappeared, clinging to the remaining shoe that was once her Agnes's. Back to the present, Quasimodo is gonna be whipped on that very same square. How convenient! Surprisingly, that spinning wheel also features in the book. Up until now, there were a total of, 2 things Disney kept in their adaptation, and the wheel is one of them? How random! Anyways, this goes on for a while, and Quasimodo starts begging for water, and people are just shouting and throwing stuff at him. But then Esmeralda appears, and she gives him water, but she's still scared about almost being kidnapped the night before, so she doesn't let him kiss her hand. And he gets angry at her, and everyone cheers. A few months go by, and then we see a gathering of rich people, and Phoebus is there. He's the soldier who rescued Esmeralda, in case you don't remember. You probably do, but it's been so long for me. It's been 1 billion pages. He's engaged to his cousin, and they're talking, and her mom is also there, and her friends. And they see Esmeralda working at the square and decide to call her over. The cousin gets jealous because Phoebus says 1 billion times that Esmeralda is so hot. And he even goes what do you think, cousin? What is this man? So she gets jealous, and all the women decide to tear Esmeralda's outfit to shreds, metaphorically speaking. Are you for real? You called her over. She was minding her business. Ah! After that, they're like, hey, aren't you gonna dance for us? And Esmeralda looks like this, heading to the door. But Phoebus goes, please, please, please dance for us. Instead, Esmeralda makes the goat write Phoebus' name on the floor, and the cousin starts crying, saying that she's a witch and blah 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 blah. Esmeralda bolts to the door, and Phoebus, after the briefest hesitation, follows her. What a man! She goes back to dancing at the square, and apparently this is Frollo's habitual watching Esmeralda hour. After a while of watching, he notices a man performing with her, and he huffs and puffs his way down the tower stairs to do something. And Quasimodo is also in love with Esmeralda. He has even stopped ringing the bells non-stop like he used to. Now he just does what is required. The man performing with her is Gringoire. Remember the writer of the play, blah 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 blah? Yeah, for me it's been a while since I've seen him. Frollo calls him over to the church and Gringoire explains himself about not being paid for the play, having to eat somehow, his weird marriage to Esmeralda, the fact that she's harmless and beautiful and that no man has ever touched her, and blah 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 blah. After spilling literally the entire story and mentioning that she's obsessed with Phoebus, whatever that refers to, Gringoire is like, "Hey, why do you care so much?" And Frollo's like, I worry about you." And I think Gringoire actually believes him. Jumping to, I don't know, another day, Jean goes visit Claude because he needs money. Frollo is obviously like, "No money for you, problem child, you burn in hell if you continue like this." And Jean's like, "Please, please, please." Wait, don't people in the church renounce to their inheritance? Why isn't Jean the lord of whatever the family used to have? Or did Frollo give their lands to the church instead of his brother, leaving him with nothing and having to beg Frollo all the time for money? Frollo's obsession with alchemy continues, and he is expecting a Mr. Jack. I think the guy who believes in astrology, but I can't remember exactly. And he arrives, and Frollo makes Jean hide in the oven and forget anything he hears in that room. Jean doesn't let the opportunity slip, and asks for money to stay quiet. Frollo agrees. Anyways, him and the other guy discuss an inquisition process, and then Jacques asks when they're gonna charge Esmeralda with witchcraft, and Frollo's like, "I'll let you know." A little later, Jean meets with his good friend Phoebus and they go out to drink, and Frollo follows them. Could this be the Phoebus that Esmeralda is obsessed with? Eavesdropping on their conversation, Frollo overhears that Phoebus has a date with her that very night. On his way to the date, Phoebus is stopped by a mysterious man who is totally not Frollo, who says that, "I know you have a date and someday I'll slit your throat for it. Now go to your date." And Phoebus goes, "Hey dude, I don't have any money to pay for the room we're gonna use. Do you have any?" And totally not Frollo says, "Yeah, I can give you the money if you hide me so I can see the girl." Totally just to prove that you're a liar for saying that the girl is Esmeralda though. Totally. And Phoebus accepts. After a while, Esmeralda appears and she says that by being with Phoebus, she's breaking a promise. Her amulet is gonna lose its power and she'll never ever find her parents. But why would she need parents now that she has Phoebus, right? Other than that, they're just like, I love you more. And then Phoebus tries the, "Why marriage? Is not getting married gonna make my love for you any weaker?" And then Frollo emerges from hiding and stabs him. Esmeralda passes out, and when she wakes up, she hears someone say that she's a witch and that she stabbed Captain Phoebus. A month later, and it's Esmeralda's trial. And it's what you'd expect. Everyone is being prejudiced, and she's like, "Oh, it was a monk." And then everyone's like, "I know what's gonna solve this. Torture." At least it's not like a torture scene. They just like squeeze her foot a little, and then she's like, yeah, I confess, just stop this, I confess." Which is, okay, it's realistic because no one has the moral fiber to go through the torture that people in media usually go through. But also not realistic because the priests in real life were probably like, no, we gotta be sure that she's telling the truth or something like that. Anyways, sometime later, Frollo goes visit her in her cell and he's like, if you want to keep living, come with me. And she recognizes him and she's like, oh no, the terrible monk, you're the one who killed Phoebus. And he's like, I love you. And she's like, oh wow, you have a weird way of showing it. Frollo spends like 5 pages with his confession of undying love and how he didn't know what else to do, so he denounced her to the Inquisition. And all she says after his monologue is, Phoebus! And he goes, no, not that name. And spends another page talking about how much he loves her. And then she goes, Phoebus. He literally gets on his knees and begs her not to reject him. And she's just like, what happened to Phoebus? And Frollo says that he died, and still Esmeralda rejects him, and still Frollo refuses to accept that Esmeralda rejected him. But he ends up leaving. End of chapter. And then we find out that Phoebus is actually alive. But he sucks, so like, who cares? He even pretends to not know who Esmeralda is, while they're reading her sentence and praying and stuff. At the last possible moment, Quasimodo slides down a rope to where they were holding her in front of Notre Dame, grabs Esmeralda, jumps to the church and screams, Sanctuary! Back in the day, criminals could ask for sanctuary and essentially be prisoners in a church.
You've chosen a magnificent prison, but it is a prison nonetheless.
Apparently not all churches allowed this, but it was fairly common, so yeah. Also, again, the book has nothing to do with the Disney movie, except for the most over-the-top scenes that you'd expect were included by Disney. So yeah, Esmeralda was saved. Frollo didn't see that happen, so he was sure that Esmeralda was dead. So when he went back to the church and saw her there, he thought it was a ghost. Okay, we're about 70% through, and I just wanna say this book is so boring. I know that I'm laughing while reading the script, but it's because the isolated facts are funny. Reading the book is not funny. And like, you don't care about anyone. The only person you feel bad for is Esmeralda, and she's not interesting in the slightest. Quasimodo had some potential, but he's barely in the book. If you think that this story sounds interesting, try your luck. I mean, you just have no idea. It's so boring, why can't everyone just die already? Moving on. The days go by and Quasimodo brings Esmeralda food and everything else she needs. But she can't get used to his physical appearance, he's just too ugly. Also, again, he's very articulate. He realizes that he frightens her because he's ugly and doesn't attack her because of it. He explains that he's deaf but can kinda lip read and communicates through gestures. Like, literally, where is his twisted and evil thought process and all the things the author said while describing him? Well, Esmeralda is a prisoner, but at least she's happy because she saw Phoebus and knows that he's alive. Also, Quasimodo brought Djali to her. Wait, did I mention? Like, the goat? I think I forgot to say her name. Anyways. One day she sees Phoebus and tries to getting his attention to no avail. Quasimodo is there like, damn, that's all that counts, being beautiful on the outside. But he volunteers to bring the captain over to her. Phoebus doesn't want to. And also he's dating his cousin, so... Quasimodo goes back to Notre Dame alone, and Esmeralda goes, "You should have waited for him the whole night, go away." Girl, okay, stop being ungrateful, what the hell? He literally saved your life and is taking care of you. After that, Quasimodo stopped ringing the bells altogether. How sad it is, an unrequited love. One night, Frollo goes try his luck with Esmeralda again, begging her to have pity and love him back and blah blah blah, and she's screaming for help. Soon, Quasimodo shows up to defend her, and Frollo goes stomping back to his cell. So apparently the parliament can just pluck people from sanctuary and they're gonna hang Esmeralda in 3 days. Frollo meets Gringoire on the street and tries to convince him to swap clothes with Esmeralda and hang in her place. And Gringoire is like, "What? I don't wanna die." And Frollo's like, "Why do you wanna live?" But they don't reach an agreement on that. Gringoire thinks of another plan though, tomorrow. Frollo gives Jean money, but tells him that it will be the last money he receives from him. Oh wow, the plot thickens if even the love for his brother has reached a breaking point. Now we get to see the plan in action, and these next few chapters make me so mad. Listen, the plan is for the Roma people to storm Notre Dame to save Esmeralda and mask it as a sacking. And it's so cool. If you've seen my video about perfume, please go watch it after this. You probably recognize this sentiment. Most of the book is trash, but then there's those few pages that are gold. The people trying to make it in and Quasimodo defending Notre Dame is so amazing. And again, a completely insane scene is actually in the book. Yeah, you know this one? The one where Quasimodo pours molten metal on the people below? No, yeah, that's in the book. It's so cool. You might be thinking, well, what's the problem then? Why did this chapter make you mad? The problem is that I've read about 400 pages of boring, irrelevant stuff just to find out that Victor Hugo knew how to write. Why not make an entire good book? Why just these few pages? And that's not all. He leaves the scene on a cliffhanger. Quasimodo kills Jean, by the way, to have a 30-page conversation with the king. We've never seen the king. We'll never see the king again. Who cares? Why are you doing this, Victor Hugo? If you wanted to show the king so bad, you could have just finished the Quasimodo scene first. All that happens is that the guards show up to disband the riot, and when Quasimodo goes to check on Esmeralda in her room, she's not there. Anyways, Gringoire takes her to Frollo, and Frollo's like, "I can save you if you stop talking about Phoebus." And she's like, "No, I hate you." And they have that same exchange, but escalated over and over and over and over and over and over again, until he goes, "Fine, die then." He takes her to the recluse, and like, this old woman is so strong that she can just hold Esmeralda there. She's cursing at her and stuff, and okay, so remember that little shoe the old woman kept? And remember Esmeralda's amulet that she wears as a necklace? Yeah, inside that, there was the other shoe. They reunite the pair, and then the recluse is hysterical, screaming, "My daughter! My daughter!" But, yeah, now you're gonna see her hang. The recluse, in her desperation, bends the bars of the cell, pulling Esmeralda into it with her. Oh my god. They hug and cry, and Esmeralda tries to hide in the cell, but eventually the soldiers see her and she hangs. And the old woman dies from shock, I suppose. Quasimodo is devastated by Esmeralda's disappearance. And then he sees Frollo quietly climbing up one of the towers. He follows his adoptive father up to a corner where they can see the square where they're hanging Esmeralda. Quasimodo sees the other laugh and, in a fit of rage, pushes him off the tower. Then, the following page, we just have to know about Phoebus' marriage, with an extremely dad joke to boot. Phoebus, likewise, came to a tragic end. He married. On the other page, though, we are back on track with Quasimodo's marriage. We have just said that on the day when the Egyptian and the archdeacon died, Quasimodo was not to be found in Notre Dame. He was never seen afterward, nor was it ever known what became of him. In the night following the execution of La Esmeralda, the hangman and his assistant took down her body from the gibbet and conveyed it, according to custom, to the appearance of Quasimodo. All that we have been able to discover is this. About a year and a half or 2 years after the events with which this story concludes, when search was made in the vault of Montfaucon for the body of Olivier le Daim, who had been hanged 2 days previously and to whom Charles VIII had granted the favor to be interred in the Better Company at Saint Laurent, among these hideous carcasses were found 2 skeletons in a singular posture. One of these skeletons, which was that of a female, had still upon it some fragments of a dress that had once been white, and about the neck was a necklace of the seeds of Adrezarach, and a little silk bag braided with green beads, which was open and empty. These things were of so little value that the hangman, no doubt, had not thought it was worth his while to take them. The other, by which this first was closely embraced, was the skeleton of a male. It was remarked that the spine was crooked, the head depressed between the shoulders, and one leg shorter than the other. There was, however, no rupture of the vertebrae of the neck, and it was evident that the person to whom it belonged had not been hanged. He must have come hither and died in the place. When those who found the skeleton attempted to disengage it from that which it held in its grasp, it crumbled to dust. I mean, this ending was very good, but thank God I never have to read this book again. Just to close off, I wanna bring up something that I see people mentioning all the time. The fact that Notre Dame in itself is the main character. I know that you probably didn't read the book, but did you get that impression from what I told you? Notre Dame is the place where the story happens to revolve around, nothing else. The same sequence of events could have happened anywhere else. Where do people get these ideas from? So yeah, this was painful. Don't put yourself through the same experience. The Hunchback of Notre Dame is a book with a bunch of nothing. It has no point, it has no charming characters, it has no interesting writing aside from a few moments. It's nothing. Don't bother. Thank you so much for watching this. Like, comment, subscribe, blah 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 blah, and I'll make more videos if an anvil doesn't fall on my head. Bye!